are you and what are you doing here? My name is Bibs. I'm glad you're back. I need to preface this conversation. So, excellent conversation with Sean Inderbitzen. He is a good friend of mine. We've been meeting for the past few years, every other week, every month or so, with our friend Al, who was on a couple episodes ago. And we get into some really good stuff. But the thing that I want to say is I decided to go into this conversation with very little agenda. I just wanted to kind of see where the wind would blow and ask questions based on, whatever came up. It is a winding conversation. It's a full winding road. I would say don't expect to be able to fully follow it. The other element that's at play is Sean and I already know each other, so we basically just treat you like one of us. Like, you already know his background, my background, which you may not know, especially Sean's. So I guess just like expect to probably be a little bit confused and be like, wait, what are they talking about? But know that we do always eventually like come back to these like core like nuggets or bits of information that hopefully are helpful and interesting. Definitely listen through to the end because he shares a really funny, embarrassing story, and it gets really vulnerable about what he wants in life, separate from the embarrassing story. And I really appreciated his transparency, and I hope that you do too. And just so you do have a little bit of context, Sean has his PhD. He is in the process of graduating right now, which is amazing. He's a therapist. He's my friend. He is a motivational interviewer. He teaches psychotherapists and licensed therapists and doctors about autism and how to better like treat and interact with folks with autism. He just got a book deal with Norton. He's very nonchalant about all of his successes, but he is an impressive person. And I hope you enjoy the free-spirited nature of our conversation.
Hey, sorry about that.
That's okay.
My computer decided to do every update it could.
Oh,
It even
no.
restarted on me. It's been a
Oh,
morning.
man. Well, thank you for joining. Round 2.
No
I
sweat.
appreciate it. I should know this, but are you still working on your doctorate, or is...
I am just about done it.
That's so cool. How are you feeling about that?
I am very ready to be done. Although it's ironic because now I'm looking at like doing another level of a therapy modality, which it's like, why am I doing this? But like the reason I'm doing it is because I have the money now, and I don't know if I'll ever have this much money again for continuing ed. So it's like it's a 16-month commitment where it's like 4 hours a week. I'm like, do I really want to do this again?
Yeah. Do you?
But I mean, so it's valuable in the sense, right? Like that while I may not want to do it, understanding the research method, right, for like how we evaluate the practice of a practice is super helpful to building a new practice, which is kind of my aim, right? Like my long aim is like beyond this book deal is like the book that comes after the book deal. It's like, what is the method that I'm going to leave in the universe after I die? Right.
That's
and
so cool.
Like, I'm thinking about it that way, right? Like, if I'm going to shift the field, like, not just my field, but like the field and the view of society's view of autism, right? Like,
Yeah.
then I have to be thinking about what are the steps that get me there. And like, I mean, my book, right? Like, my book is about applying motivational interviewing, polyvagal theory, and sensory motor psychotherapy. So I have to go the distance in sensory motor before, like I did in motivational interviewing, to really be able to put forth a book that can be said, this is counseling theory on autism. But to like have a counseling theory on autism means like you actually have to do the work to like have the... So no, I don't want to do it, but yes, I think I need to.
Yeah, fair.
Hold on. I want to take my sweater off. Give me a sec.
Okay, sure. Oh my gosh, yes.
All right, now I'm good.
Oh my gosh, I'm obsessed with this shirt.
I know, right? Isn't it
Did
bomb?
you do this on purpose? Did you know I would
No.
love this?
No, I didn't. I just kind of love it. So that's why I wore it.
I love it so much.
Me
Oh my
too.
gosh. Perfect
This is
outfit.
totally an ally.
Absolutely. Okay, now I'm distracted by the shirt. What was I saying? Okay, so a couple questions. You had said, and then I will have you like more officially introduce yourself, but just while we're on this, you mentioned like you don't really want to, but you feel like you have to for thinking like long term vision.
Yeah.
So, two questions. One, you have a very like realistic understanding of what it takes to get to where you're going, I think. I mean, maybe not like every single step, every single detail. There's always an element of kind of figuring it out as you go when you're in new territory. But overall, like I can tell you've thought about this and you're not just like, oh, my dreams are going to come true one day. Or like if I just,
Right.
you
Right.
are looking at it very holistically, which is very important. And I think it's easy to lose that like practical side and then like accidentally not leave the legacy that you want to leave or whatever it may be. So, was there ever a transition period where you were like, or a realization period where you kind of came to the conclusion that you were going to have to do things that you didn't necessarily want to do in order to get to
Oh,
the
for
thing you
sure.
most wanted to do? Like,
Yeah.
how
I
did you figure
mean,
that out?
so I tried doing things my way for a very long time before I ever knew you and Al, and Rob Bell and that whole world, right? Like, I had to make a conscious choice to become a therapist, and work with people with autism because my therapist was like, "You'd be really good at this." I'm like, "Okay, let's give it a try." Because nothing else had worked, right? Like, I wanted to be a policy analyst. I went for my master's in social work with community practice as my focus, which is a very different focus than individuals, right? So I
Yeah.
kind of come at this from a different place than most people do because most people are like, I want to be a therapist. And then they go on and be a therapist, but I wanted to be a researcher. That's always been my aim. I didn't know what that was going to be in or what that was for, and that has looked different ways over time. But so I even got a job during grad school, at least in terms of as of offers as a policy analyst for the Department of Workforce Development. But it would have meant choosing my career over my kids. And that's just not something I was ever willing to do. It's just not something I was super comfortable with. Like, some people put their career first, but in my mind, it's like, I mean, I don't live to work, I work to live. Like,
Yes.
the living part is far more important to me than the working part. And so while some people will like sacrifice everything for their job, I made the conscious choice 7, 8 years ago to just not do that, right? And so I think the
Mm-hmm.
order really matters. And so I made that choice. So I had to come up with something new after I graduated. And so I thought about the things that were important to me were a little more practical than like what the hell I was going to do with my life. Like, I know that sounds bad, but like for me, like having a scheduled where I can work 9 to 5 is really important. Having an employer that I can be like, yeah, this is really hard. What do we do? That was
Mm-hmm.
really important. So, no, like I didn't ever make the conscious choice. I just kind of, out of pragmatism, had to, right? Like, if I wanted to honor my commitment to my kids, if I wanted to be a different kind of dad, I had to give up what I wanted to do. And so,
Mm-hmm.
like, it kind of started back then. And then I made the conscious choice to shift to therapy because I tried being a nursing home social worker and that was awful. And staying at the Department of Workforce Development wasn't going to go anywhere unless I got a second master's. I was not about to do that. So, I mean, I kind of made the shift to like doing the therapy thing first. And then I started to really think about, because in my first few weeks of hire at North Lakes, they really talked about like, what are the trajectory of therapists over time? And therapists really learn the most in their first 5 years of practice. And so like it dawned on me very quickly that I want to be a consultant. So like I kind of looked at what are other people who are doing the kind of consulting do I want to do. What did they do? And so they got into the motivational interviewing network of trainers. That was a very competitive process. I learned as much as I could about it and kind of started to move in that direction. And so once I got in, it was like, I mean, it was a really competitive process to get in, right? You submit an audio recording and then some random stranger evaluates your own evaluation of your practice if like they agree or not, basically. And so it's this really intense process, but somehow I got in. Like, don't know. But then it was like the next piece of it was I need a doctorate to do research because I always wanted to do research. So the thinking was I'd do research on motivational interviewing with people with autism, which is kind of what I told you guys about when I met with Rob Bell,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so
Yeah.
then somewhere along the line that shifted, right? Like I put that course out, like it got some traction. I mean, it could have been a thing, but I don't know, didn't feel right. So I didn't like really pursue that line of research. I got my stuff done. Somehow I got into Tulane. I'm still not sure how I did that. But so I got into Tulane and then I I took care of getting my like dissertation stuff done first. And I won a $20,000 grant to teach motivational interviewing for a year. And so that's what I did 22 is I taught motivational interviewing to an organization. And so then, right, like doing that kind of opened some like your credible doors, like because someone gave you a big old grant. And so that's opened more speaking doors. I mean, I've just talked a lot about autism. And then at some point, like it just clicked that I needed to connect with Stephen Porges because I did this sensory motor level one thing and they really taught a lot about polyvagal theory. And so I knew someone who worked at UNC Chapel Hill because Steve's professor emeritus at UNC Chapel Hill. So I was like, hey, can you help me get in touch with this guy? And she was like, sure. And so she reached out to this lady named Michelle Patriquin from Baylor who introduced me to Steve. And then Brenna Maddox, like somebody who I met like in my first year of practice at a research conference in Atlanta, connected us and we had an hour long conversation with Steve and he agreed to write a paper with me first. Like real long shot there. I was like, hey, do you want to write a paper? He's like, sure. Like send it to me. And he loved it. So like then it kind of just started opening doors, right? So like I did the sensory motor training because when you're in community practice, you get all kinds of problems that work through the door. Some of the biggest problems are addictions, trauma, developmental delays seem to be a pretty big one too. So I needed something, and I really didn't like CBT. Like I just didn't like cognitive behavioral therapy. That was not my jam. Like as a
Mm-hmm.
thinking person, I could never think my way out of my feelings. And so I kind of wanted to learn more about myself. So I did a body based, like somatic psychology approach. And that now I'm like knee deep in this sensory motor stuff because I'm doing a research study on sensory motor psychotherapy in kids with PTSD and autism using therapists from Canada and the US. And we're having them do sensory motor psychotherapy on kids with autism with
Wow.
PTSD. So, I mean, now it's just kind of like, did I make the conscious choice? No, but I mean, it's kind of a choice of survival because now I have a book deal that sort of introduces this new method and I have to actually research the method to like make it
Yeah.
evidence based. And I mean, the thing about the series I'm going to be in, like if I get into interpersonal neurobiology, like I think I will, or I'm hoping I will, like because I'm at Norton, like it's gonna, how do I say this? It's gonna like just the mere fact that it's Norton, right? Like introduces a level of credibility that
Mm-hmm.
you just get through prestige, right? Like they've put out most of the modern counseling theory, right? Like they
Yeah.
hold most of the modern neuroscience. So like just being in that same vein as the people who created the therapy have paid thousands of dollars to learn to do, right? Like so yeah, it's more a journey of pragmatism, I hate to say it, and a little dreaming.
I'm definitely hearing both. Like, first of all, I feel like I should acknowledge that the listeners don't know you, and that's my bad for not having you
It's
introduce
okay.
yourself first. But my guess is the listeners, as a listener, you might be a little bit confused right now because you don't exactly know Sean. But I hope you're still getting little nuggets from this. And also, I feel like that's kind of the beauty of these conversations is like we're just treating the listeners like they're one of us, one of our friends already. So yeah, don't let me forget to have us do official introductions. But related to what you just said, I do hear a lot of both. Like you're very practical, and by practical I mean like it seems like when you learn new information from the world from whoever that you don't dismiss it, you don't like you take that as feedback and then
Mm-hmm.
like shift accordingly, and you also combine that with dreaming, with believing in yourself, with asking for what you want, even if as you say, it's a long shot. That's what I'm hearing, at least. Like,
A lot of
because,
long shots.
but that's what you always say is like, so for everyone listening that doesn't know Sean, I know you to be somebody that, like, so let's do introductions.
Okay.
Let's just do introductions. Why don't we just tell people how we know each other
Okay, so
to
we
start?
met at a Zoom call with Rob Bell, who's the shit. I hope he listens to this and hears me call him the shit.
Yes.
But he was the shit, and we were studying communications, and or at least I was. I mean, that's why I came to the call because I
Mhm.
wanted to do this thing with autism, motivational interviewing, and like shift the field. And I don't know that that ever really worked or not, but it definitely has increased access to mental health as sort of a line of thinking about autism.
Mhm.
Like one of the things that's been really near and dear to my heart is seeing autism actually labeled a psychiatric disorder, which like there's a whole bunch of stuff we could unpack. But I'm a therapist by trade. I'm a person living with autism. I don't really care about what the politically correct version of that is. Like for me, it's just I have autism. It's part of my identity. Like, okay, who
Mhm.
cares? Like I have arms too, but that's not my entire identity.
Yes.
So
I
yeah,
love that. Okay, amazing. So, yes, we met like 2, 3 years ago now.
something like that. 2020.
2020. Yeah.
That would be like 3 years
Um
ago now. It's
and
crazy.
we've been meeting. So, if the listeners listen to the episode with Al, Sean
Mm-hmm.
is like a part of that group. So, we've been meeting basically every 2 weeks,
Yep.
give or take. I would say at least monthly for the most part. Since
Bi-weekly,
since we met in
give or take.
2020.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's been really cool. Like, I don't really know what to call our little group. It's like creativity slash support group slash like,
Making sure we do our creative shit.
yeah, it's been really cool. But anyway, I was gonna say, like, I feel like every one of those calls, you're like, yeah, I don't know how it happened, but I'm getting my PhD, or I'm doing this, or I'm doing this
I
speaking
got a book
engagement, or I
deal.
got a book deal. Yeah. And I
Yes.
mean, it's it's wild. Like, it's super impressive. And I guess I just wonder how much of your whole, like, yeah, I don't know how it happened. Like, is that earnest? Because to me, I'm like, well, it makes sense. It makes sense why it happened, because sure, maybe there's like some luck and whatnot, but like, you're clearly adding value. You're like making or taking those long shots. So I guess I'm like, are you as kind of like surprised but also nonchalant as you seem to be? Or are you like, yeah, this makes sense that I
No,
now
I'm
have a book deal?
surprised.
Because
Like,
really?
I mean, it makes sense, and I'm surprised, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think I may have met Pat Ogden the other day. I don't really know if I met her or not because she's not CC'd on the email, so I think she's blind carbon copied. But
Oh,
like,
okay.
she just like because my mentor and her are writing a book for the same series, right? Like, I don't know. So I think there's a
Yeah.
little bit of right, like what I'm doing actually is different, right? And like
Yeah.
different in a way that people want to pay for. Like I don't really understand why, but people just keep paying me for it. And so it just keeps happening. And it so there's some of that, right? Like there's some real belief in myself professionally. I
Uh
wish this
huh.
translated to other areas of my life. It's slowly starting to, but
Mm
it's more so in like this career. Like I just have always known I want to do consulting. Like that's just kind of I just never anticipated that if I got a book deal that would open up way more in the way of consulting. Like I do
hmm.
consulting
Yeah.
1 day a week right now some for the Oklahoma Department of Substance Abuse and Mental Health.
Wow.
So like, I mean, part of it, right, like is some very strategic decisions, right? Like getting into the motivational interviewing of network of trainers, right? Like these are people who just by being affiliated with this group get lots of gigs. And there's no, I mean, there is a certification now, but most of us are like, who cares? That's at least my outlook is I don't give a shit about some certification process. I did the hard thing by getting in.
Mm
Like my buddy Chris has tried to get in and hasn't. Hopefully he'll get in this year. I don't really know if he's paying attention to that or not, but My point, right? Like there are some strategic moves, but by and large, it's dumb luck and just a willingness to fail. Like I
Yeah.
failed a lot. Like I've had lots of ideas shot down, and at some point, you just stop giving a shit, right? Like
Yeah.
you just stop caring. And so, I mean, I have always lived with the perspective that if I believe something's for me professionally, I should go for it because if it's meant to be, it will be, right? Like if God's behind it, he will sort of enter into the equation. And some things that seem absurd to me might not be absurd to him. And so
Hmm.
that's kind of the perspective I live with in terms of my professionalism.
I want to be like that.
I would love to be like this in other areas of my life.
I'm glad you mentioned that you failed because I
Oh, I
I
fail
do
a
think that
lot.
even I forget that you have
Oh, I
because
fail a ton.
obviously remember the big successes, and I also think that you're like quite nonchalant, at least in your delivery, about any failures that you might share. Like it's not like in the same way that you're kind of nonchalant about the successes. Like you're not like I'm super duper
It's a good word.
crushed, my world is stopping, like. So how you mentioned like eventually you just stop giving a shit, like if people shoot down an idea or whatever. How do you not give a shit? Did you used to give a shit and then
I
now you
used to
don't,
give a
or?
lot more of it. So, like, I have to backtrack. So,
Okay.
like, I went through a really bad divorce.
Mm-hmm.
And I literally, right, like, I mean, when you get cheated on and like you moved 1,000 miles away from home and you have nothing, right? Like, and you're losing your kids, right? Like, it's pretty gut wrenching. I think stop giving a shit because I had some secret power. It was, I didn't have the energy to give a shit anymore. Like, I just kind of lost, like, my one glimmer of hope was doing my MSW at that time in my life. And so then like I actually took a semester off in grad school because my field advisor was like, why don't you take a semester off to figure out all this bullshit with your ex-wife? And so like there was a court battle, there was sort of all these pieces, and so like I stopped my MSW. I didn't honestly know if I'd be able to go back or not. Like I wanted to, and I was
Mm-hmm.
always working towards that, but like so I had a whole summer of like not doing internship, just chilling. It was so nice. I like looking back, I'm like, wow, my marriage failed. Like it just failed so hard. There were so many red flags that I didn't see. And like relationally, right? Like I just failed so hard. Like I think I failed. I mean, there were a lot of pieces to it that I probably wouldn't make the decisions the way I did then, but not giving a shit. Sorry, this is a really long-winded answer, right? Really was a byproduct of kind of just being in a shitty situation. Like I stopped because and like I literally like had every bar in the world you can imagine to starting my MSW back up, right? So like I literally got like I got a placement like 2 weeks before it was due. And then I sent the paperwork to the guy, and the guy sent it to his VP, and the guy wouldn't sign. And so I literally had to go above this VP's head to get him, his boss, to make him sign the signature. So it was like, even from the beginning, it was a fight. Like life is a
Mm.
war against all, is what Hobbes said, and that was very much the case, right? But like somehow I managed. Go ahead.
No, so I just want to make sure I'm understanding. So MSW, Masters in Social Work,
Yep.
you were trying to get the sign off to make that like official and complete that. And at the same time, your like breakup is happening alongside that?
So my
Or
divorce had started happening like 12 months earlier, or like
okay.
10
So it
months
is kind
earlier.
of all
Yeah, it's all at once. And I
overlapping.
was enrolled in my MSW. My MSW was my job, right? So when you do a
Okay.
master's of social work, you have to have a field placement and right like work. So you have to do field placement on top of your work, right?
Okay.
And so like I was doing that all spring, but this court battle got really hairy, and it was just like I needed to stop. And so I took a
Yeah.
new job. I changed employers. I couldn't find a field placement. So I withdrew in the spring. And so then over the summer, I spent the whole summer trying to find this internship. 2 weeks before like everything was due, I finally got one. And like
Wow.
the day before, so that's when this VP was fighting with me, like, I'm not going to sign this. And he wasn't like fighting it openly. He was just very like, I'm not going to respond to your emails. I'm going to be a dick about it. And
Mm.
so he was. And so then his boss made him sign off on it. It was great. But like, there's no way I could have done that. Like, I don't have the influence or the prestige to make that happen. Like, I'm smart, but I'm not that smart. Like, this is somebody who's like 30 years into their career saying, I don't want this. So I'm not going to let this happen. And we're just going to delay it. And then he'll just miss the deadlines. And like, just by being a jerk, he'll get his way. And so, like, I didn't let him do that. And so, I mean, to me, that was like God being like, hey, like, you're going to do this. Like, I have a vision for
Mm-hmm.
this. And so then, like, there were like a series of things after this, right? Like, then the university wanted me to enroll in the spring. And they were like, like, we can't really do this after. And like, I had to fight and like get the dean to approve me entering on time. So, like,
Wow.
not only did I have to fight and get the dean to enter me, then like my field, so the university has a field liaison, and she hated my internship and she kept trying to like kill my internship the whole time. And so like
Gosh.
it was a battle getting it off the ground, but once I got it off the ground, I was pretty good. But
Yeah.
there were
Damn.
lots of layers of fighting, right? So like once you can survive that, like, I mean, I
Yeah.
think it really comes back to like you have to have belief in yourself, right? Like even if nobody else does, like, and I hold this more loosely in relationship, but at least in terms of like, I think there is a value in belief in yourself. Like I think Christianity teaches a lot of like you suck to people inadvertently, and I don't think that's what they're going for most of the time. Like most of the good
Yeah.
God fearing Christian people I know are very like, I'm awesome and Jesus loves me, and I also have some shortcomings, and so like somehow I think the vast majority of people though get hit with I suck. So that's why I don't want to be a part of Christianity, because I don't believe I suck. And so I mean, for me,
Mm.
I kind of fall in the middle of those two things. I think I suck,
Interesting.
and like, yeah, that's like no secret. Like the quote on the back of my phone, just because of how it's been lately. It says, I am worth everything, even when someone stops fighting for me.
Ooh.
Because
Yes.
people stop fighting for me all the time, and it sucks. And
That
some of
does
that's
suck.
just other people, but some of
Mm-hmm.
that's me.
Yeah. Wait, what do you mean some of that's other people, some of that's me?
So if we go back to like the internship example where there were like 600 hurdles to get through
Yeah.
over like a 4 month period, it was really terrible, honestly. It was a
Mm.
horrible time in life. I would never recommend working full time, being a single dad half time, and doing grad school classes and an internship. Like some of that's like I let things go, right?
Oh,
Like
I
I could have
see.
let the internship go and they would have stopped fighting all along. But
Right.
I had to fight to get what I wanted. And I just have never not had to fight to get what I want. Like at
Yeah.
least for those days, because divorce is horrible,
Mm-hmm.
especially when family court's involved.
Yeah. Totally. This is so insightful. I feel like I'm getting to know you on like a whole new level. And what's interesting is it's not that I don't think you by any means withheld sharing failures or like struggles throughout the last few years with us, but I do think that like all of the, like book deals and like all of the positives, I think just like made me create this like simplified image of you in my mind of like things just like Sean works hard, believes in himself, and like things just work out. And that's amazing and like justified. And you should be seeing all the success that you've seen. But I think I failed to really recognize the challenges that have been like weaved in throughout all of that. It's a good reminder for me and like hopefully for other people that are trying to accomplish goals or do things or struggling in any way that like it's part of it.
Oh, it's
Like
definitely
having to
part of it.
fight for yourself, having people let you go or stop believing in you or whatever, like you have to advocate for yourself.
No one else is going to do it.
Right.
And there's the good Lord, but he doesn't necessarily come down, and his voice is not always loud,
Yeah.
is what I'll say.
Yeah, it's just a good reminder that like you have to have failure, you have to have challenges, you have to hear no, you have to fight back in order to also have the upside.
Well, and it works this way in employment, but it doesn't work this way in human relationships.
Yeah. Wait, say more about that.
It's funny because over the time you've known me, like I've probably dated more than I have in most of my life. Because like
Mm.
I've actually applied myself at some level. I don't know that I've applied myself at that much of a level, but I keep seeming to go on dates and I keep seeming to fail. But I don't know that it's all failure, right? So like
No.
relationally, right? Like if somebody says I'm not ready at this moment, I believe them. Like my buddies are like, Sean, you did something wrong. I'm like, no, like this person is saying they're not ready and there is context to support that, right? Like, which is funny because I'm the one with the social impairment. So like I don't think it's helpful to fight in really close relationship. I mean, I do, like I think fighting is warranted, but like fighting for something the other person doesn't want isn't helpful.
Yes. Oh, that's a really good point. It is different with personal relationships, especially because when you're fighting for something in a career, you're fighting for you for the most part. Like you want that guy to sign the paper so that you can do your thing. You're not asking the guy to sign a paper to then marry you or like.
Well, right, be in willful close connection with you a lot of time. It's how do we get to where we need to go to get this vision achieved?
It's such a good point that like that same approach is not going to work in personal relationships. And yet, I feel like there's a way to go after what you want. It just looks completely different. It looks more like what you're saying, which is if somebody tells you they're not ready or they don't want this, that you believe them.
Right. No really means no in relationship versus like in
Right.
employment where no does mean no. And right, like if you can make a business case for something, people might be inclined to change their mind. I just find less value to that in the context of romantic entanglement or friendship because people need to feel safe. And
Totally.
like employment is not about safety. Like as my friend Steve says, like there is no way to retain workers over the longer term because work is not about safety. Companies that want creativity are just fucked.
Wait, what do you mean?
So like our creative side, right, comes from when we feel safe. So if
Yes.
like we don't feel safe, we're
Oh, I get
not
what
going
you're
to be
saying.
creative, right?
And because
So
work is not like safety is not a priority at work, creativity then
well,
becomes
threat is literally the premise of capitalism, right?
right.
And
Ooh,
so
that's
like
so good.
if you think about it that way, right, like
Wait, can you say more about what you mean by that? Like for people that are like, what do you mean?
do X, so I will pay you. And if you don't do X, then there will be Y consequence, right? Like you won't get paid, right? Like that's a threat, right? That's a like your nervous system. Like, and I mean, I think a
Yes.
certain amount of threat is okay in employment, but like being an artist, right? Like the reason it's hard to be an artist and get paid is because being creative has to come from a place where you feel safe. And if you're
Mm-hmm.
not eating, it's hard to feel safe.
Exactly. Oh my gosh, that's so well said. Um, I'm just thinking, I'll cut out all this dead air.
I like dead air.
I am trying to edit less, honestly, just in the spirit of letting people in on the authentic conversation.
It's like this date I went on, right? Like the girl could not stand silence, which like says a lot about her and her relationship to silence.
Yeah, I'm working on that.
I think people do it because they're nervous.
Yeah. But are you like you're comfortable with silence?
Yeah, only because I've worked at it.
How? Just kind of reminding yourself that like silence does not mean danger.
No, it's more of a like the sensory motor psychotherapy stuff I started talking out about, right? Like that was kind of the juxtaposition point. I had this guide teacher who taught me sensory motor psychotherapy for traumatic wounds, right? So like when you work with trauma for wounds of development, the silence is a really valuable tool. So he used to say, don't rescue people from the silence.
Ooh.
So like having to sit and not rescue people, like it's hard, right? Like,
Yeah.
but it gets easier when someone commits suicide and it's your job to keep them alive. And there's no amount of right things you could have done to make the outcome different.
Mm. How does that make it easier?
Because think about it, right? Like if your whole job, right, is to keep people moving towards life getting better, right? There's a certain amount of it that's in other people's control. And so
Totally.
really, right, like balancing their control with your control, right? Like when you're someone's therapist, you have a tremendous amount of influence. And yet people still leave your office and go and make decisions, right? Like killing
Mm-hmm.
themselves. And so if I can survive someone killing themselves, I can survive someone being uncomfortable.
Okay, I get it now. Yeah, like you can handle some silence because you're accustomed to handling things that are far less
Far
comfortable.
worse. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Um,
you just have to make space for the discomfort. Like it's
yeah,
part of the process. So, like, if you're going to be comfortable, you have to be okay with not filling space, right? Like,
exactly. Like it's completely an illusion for me to be like just talk 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 and I'm showing my discomfort is all it is. In a
it's
different
okay.
way. It's just good reflections. So I'm talking a lot about like lessons you're helping me learn. What's one lesson you're learning right now?
Oh, one that I hate, which is that it's not my fault. Like,
Mm.
be easier if it was. This is a lesson I can't seem to stick the landing on. Like I keep going on these dates, getting these I get in a lot of situationships.
Which is what?
Situationship is when you're like romantically involved with someone, but you never really define it and you never define what your expectations are and you just
Okay, it's like an it's complicated Facebook status.
yeah, like except in real social form because I don't have a Facebook. So
Yeah. No,
like
I don't do that on Facebook anymore, to be clear. But
I didn't think you did, but just to clarify, right? Like I think there are
yeah.
these real romantic situations, right, where you're like, wow, this is really good. And there's all this stuff that I'm just gonna wait for the other person to talk about.
Hmm.
Because I don't know, when you're a direct person like I am, you tend to veer on the side of being chill. At least that's what I do. I can't say,
Really?
yeah, because I don't know, like this girl I saw on Friday, I think I saw her Friday. We had a great date. Like we were talking about having a second date, and then she was like, "I'm not over my ex." I'm like, she's like, "I can't do this." I'm like, "That's okay."
Oh.
But like when someone like basically compliments you and says you were a great date and you were awesome, right? Like this is not about you, this is genuinely I just had a breakup, right? Like it's really
Yeah.
hard to find the minutia in that about what I did because like I'm sure I did something, right? But I like and I don't think I'm a great person. Like people tell me I'm a good person, but I'm like, no, I'm not. Like I don't want to be a good person sometimes. But like
Why?
because I mean finishing last sucks, but it's true. Like that's what happens when you're a good person. So
Oh. That's the belief.
I think so. I mean, I have yet to. So it's funny. Most of my friends, like you, Al, I have a friend named Jeremy, I have a friend named Eric, right? Like everyone I know has been with their partner for most of their life. I, on
Mm.
the other hand, am in this weird space of like, I can't seem to stick the landing. And so, like, when I say I can't stick the landing, I think it's more about like just letting people, like, when the right person comes along, there won't be. Okay, so I should backtrack. Um,
Okay.
so, like, I was in this relationship where this person left and they left really abruptly and really confusingly, right? But what was disorienting wasn't necessarily that they left, it was how they all of a sudden shifted from like being consistent in their attachment to me to being completely inconsistent, right? Like
Mm.
they went from like I'm here every day because usually when you get in a relationship, right, you find a rhythm, you can trust the rhythm, you trust the other person, and all of a sudden there was no trust, right, which is a developmental wound, right? Like that is a true example of like
Mm-hmm.
how someone like can like have these breaks in attachment, like these just random, seemingly random, like honestly, when I think about cruelty, I think about the seemingly randomness of the world, right? I'm still getting over that, right? Like I went in for a kiss on Friday and I couldn't do it. And the reason I couldn't do it was because I'm still wounded at some level.
Mm,
And like, I don't know what that's about yet, but I'll get there. But
yeah.
nevertheless, right? Like, it seemed like we were going to have a second date. And then, but part of what like that was helpful for was like, I realized there were actually times with my ex where like we were in that rhythm of attachment and connection and trust. And I still don't know what happened, but I think it's less of that I'm learning new things and more that I'm relearning old things, right? Like
Hmm.
that there are people out there who think I'm decent, and it is okay to ask, like, hey, do you want to go on a second date? For them to say yes and then them to change their
Yes.
minds, right? But like, I also think, right, when you meet somebody like you and Dan, right, like you and Dan have a pretty consistent attachment the entire time I've
Mm,
known you. You've been with Dan. That doesn't mean there aren't ups and downs, but you know,
yeah. I need to think about like how comfortable I am or not about talking about my own past experiences. But I do feel like that's new for me. Like I am learning how to be securely attached or how to lean secure as
right.
like an anxiously attached or like disorganized attached.
Oh, for sure.
Disorganized attachment
Yup, disorganized
person.
attachment. Yeah.
So yeah, that's been like a big thing that I work on as like somebody that has historically felt very not securely attached. The way that you said it made it almost sound like I had there's secure attachment, and that's actually like such a big, I guess it feels a little bit like maybe like what you're doing now. Like you're just like learning that just because it was like this way in the past doesn't mean that it can't be better or like feel safer or be more consistent.
I find the safety super uncomfortable, honestly. Like,
Oh, yeah. You prefer the
oh yeah.
like unpredictability.
Yeah, like it's
Yeah,
so
what
much
a
easier.
rush. Love it.
God, yeah. I mean, that's probably part of it too. Like, I'm a bit of an adrenaline junkie,
Yeah.
but
That's so normal though, I think. If
it
you're
definitely
especially if you
is.
are accustomed to that and maybe like naturally like emotional extremes for whatever reason. But the fact that we're able to talk about it, I would like to believe indicates that we're not going to just fully lean into that and be like, okay, let's find the craziest relationship we can find, you
I
know?
mean, I'm dating more predictable people, I think. I've started
Yeah.
dating all these moms. I don't know if it's a phase or a thing. Like, I haven't really quite figured it out because these situations keep falling in my lap. Kind of
Hmm.
like the work side is like as soon as I like stop putting forth any effort, like it just happens. So like I'm
Ooh,
just like busy doing my thing because life's awesome, right? Like after this, I'm probably gonna go for a run. Like,
nice.
like it's just life, right? Like life's has its moments, but I don't know. Like I am finding these situations falling in my lap. And
Hmm.
that's kind of how most things in life have been, right? Like, I mean, I think like there is a certain level of like, if I have an opportunity to see it in one and I have to go for it. But like with women, right? Like for probably a solid year after my ex left, like it was trying to date baristas and waitresses. And like that was really a phase for me. Like my therapist even had a joke where like she used to say, Sean, it's just another waitress.
Wait, was that what your ex was? Or
No, no, my
oh,
ex was
you don't have to tell me if you don't want. I didn't know if that's what you meant by like it's a phase because you
no,
were
no,
trying to like
no. It's
recreate something.
genuinely was like these were just so I don't cook any of my own meals because of my trauma history.
Mm.
And so like I go to a lot of restaurants and I meet a lot of young women or waitresses, right? But like
Okay.
they generally are at a very different place in life. And like I've just come to learn that more over time. Like as like I've grown out of that part of like that phase of development.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's fair. I also think it's good that you're evaluating like who and what works for the way that you structure your life in terms of who you're with and who you spend time with. This has been the most like winding road conversation. Have you felt like that? I feel like that's the trade-off maybe of not being like, okay, question 1, question 2, question 3, you know? Um
Yeah,
but it's been fun. I want to try this thing, and since this whole conversation has felt like quite experimental,
go for
um,
it.
I'm going to ask it. I think it would be really fun to end conversations when we have time talking about an embarrassing story. Do you have time for one more question?
I have time for as many or as few questions as you want to ask me. I don't have my next
Okay.
thing till 12. So
Amazing. Do you have an embarrassing story coming to mind that you would be willing to share?
I'm going to tell you my worst date story just because
Okay, let's go for it.
this tends to be the funniest story
Yeah,
I have
cool.
about my many failures. So I went on this date once, right? I was in Madison for a council meeting of something or other.
Mm-hmm.
And it like it was a governor appointment kind of deal, which sounds way more impressive than it is. Regardless of that, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
so I'm down in Madison and I'd been talking to this girl in Plenty Fish, and like she was like, I want to come over. I'm like, okay. Can I bring my dog? I'm like, sure. Like, whatever. Like, hotels let dogs in. It's like, it's my emotional support animal. I was like, okay, like this will be interesting. And so
Uh-huh.
like she comes over, we start talking, we would talk for hours. It's late at night. And she's like telling me about her UFC ex-boyfriend who's she's still very connected to. I'm like, what are we doing here? Like, this is not, I'm not gonna make any moves here. Like, I don't want to die. Just really not my thing. I'm talking to her. It's late at night. I'm like, okay, what the hell is going on here? So like then her dog takes a shit on my floor.
Oh
And she just looks at me like, and I'm like, what do you mean?
no.
Like, and she's like, you need to clean it up. I'm like, but it's your dog. And she's like, but you need to clean it up. And of course, like,
What?
lizard brain takes over and is like, I need to do this. And so I did it. And like, she left and we never talked again. And it was probably the
What?
most awkward date I've ever been on because her dog shit on my hotel floor.
Oh my gosh,
So
why did
fucking
she
weird.
make you clean it up?
I have no idea.
I'm laughing, but that's awful.
I mean, like, there was a time in life when I would have like done anything for sex, and like I
Yeah.
didn't even get to have sex that night. Like, I don't, and I wasn't going to because of UFC boyfriend, but like
Right.
this was awful.
What a bizarre situation.
It was so bizarre, dude. Like,
How did you feel? Were you like really bothered by it, or just was it just funny to you? Like, that's
I was just like, what the fuck? Like,
just
this is so
confused.
weird. Like, it's more weird than anything.
How did you even get from like cleaning up the shit to her leaving? Like, were you just like, well, all clean. Have a
She
good
just
night.
was like, I'm ready to be done. Like, I don't know. She was really pretty, but like, I have this weird habit of being like a stop in. Like, there's this Old Dominion song. It's like basically the premise of the song. It's like
Mm.
he's like a hotel where people stop in and then they leave, right? But like he's a midnight hotel where people stop in and they leave. And I kind of
Mm.
look at my life that way, like when it comes to relationships, right? Like people stop in, they take a look, they enjoy their time, and then they take off. And like, it's just like, what? Like,
Hmm.
so I don't know. It's lonely, but it's also kind of not because you get used to it. But like how
Hmm.
we got from her dog taking a shit to her leaving and how I got on this wild tangent is beyond me. But she stayed and talked for like 5 more minutes and was like, okay, I'm ready to go. And it was just like, what the fuck?
What the fuck?
Like what the actual fuck? Like I
Yeah.
tried talking to her the next day and she like didn't respond. And I'm like, whatever, like I'm not like no loss. Like
Yeah.
if your dog can take
No.
shits and you're gonna make me do it, like that says everything I ever need to know.
Yeah.
So
Totally. I'm sorry that happened, and
it's okay. It was
I'm
really fun though.
glad that yeah, it's an
In hindsight,
excellent story.
it's a great story.
Really, really good story. What is something that you're like one thing that you want? Like a hope or desire?
Hope or desire to be done being single indefinitely.
Mm.
This is gonna sound super lame, but like if you've ever seen Up, like the little
I
old man,
haven't.
what?
I'm ashamed.
You
I
should
feel like I'd
be.
love it.
You would love it. It's all about secure attachment. But this old man, right? Like he married this lady and they were together for like 60 years. And
Mm.
like I just want that and I never seem to find that. And it's like no matter how many dates I go on, it always kind of like they're just like, no. Like not that I've never been in relationship because I have, but like I'd like to find somebody who's healthy and I can do that with. Like
Mm-hmm.
weird as that sounds, because I haven't ever
It
been
doesn't
in a
sound weird at
healthy
all.
attachment, right? Like so I would like to have that. So that would be my hope and desire. I know it's super lame, right? Like to want a wife and like
No?
be married, but
Why do
it's
you say that? It's not at
because it sounds
all.
like a
That's
Nicholas Sparks movie, right? Like I don't want my life to be that defeatingly lame. Like
I mean, I don't think that's lame at all. I mean, so many people want that. That's like the most
feel like it's
such a human
incredibly
thing.
hard to find though.
Yeah.
Like again, like this is the downside of like doing really good, incredible things is like you kind of have your expectations set high. Like you
Totally.
kind of have like a certain level of like, I want this, and this. And it's not like those are super rigid things for me, right? Like I like women in the ways other guys are like, Sean, why do you like women like that? I'm just like, I do. And like, I don't like this one for X
Mm-hmm.
reason. And they're like, but I like them for that reason. I'm like, great for you. And I kind
Yeah.
of think it kind of works like that, right? Like everybody talks about like this hourglass figure thing, right? Like, but I don't think it's that simple. Like I think
Yeah.
there's a lot of research around that and there's a lot of conversation around that. But I think like I see weird looking couples all the time I would never think would belong together. And like I kind of appreciate that. Like I
Yeah.
just kind of appreciate like having a person who knows what they want. Like I don't know. I don't feel like I'm ever gonna find it. Like it's just kind of
Oh,
how it feels these days. Like I don't know.
I could very easily be like, "You're gonna find someone."
Don't
Like, is
don't.
but I'm like, I'm refraining, but I will just say that I want for you what you want for yourself, and
Oh,
I do
this is
hope
what I want for
you get
myself.
that.
A wife, which sounds really dumb and a bit like a Nicholas Sparks movie. So
I
stupid.
beg to differ.
So
You're
stupid.
not like, oh, we must meet in this super crazy way, and then there has to be a conflict, and then we're gonna come back together and be like that. I would be like,
Is
okay,
that
that
like a
sounds like
thing
a
that people do?
no. I'm describing like every romantic comedy or like a Nicholas Sparks novel. Like I don't think that's I don't hear that from you. I just hear you saying like I want connection, companionship, love in my life, and that's like I mean, don't we all? That's
Intimacy.
not to minimize what you want, but like it's to say the opposite. Like exactly. Like that's so valid to want that. And it's cool to want that if that's what you want.
It is what I want. I just feel
Yeah.
it's like it's never gonna happen.
I want to say that I think it's going to happen, but should I not say that?
I don't care if you say it. I don't. You saying it will not make me think it's gonna happen.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm not asking you to not feel what you feel.
You give me your best. Like it's gonna happen.
It's going to happen. I just know it. No, for real. I mean, this is a thing. Okay, I don't know if it's going to happen. However, I'm hopeful that it will because oh my god, I'm rolling my eyes. But
God.
like you're such a good person, good human, like kind, loving, would be like a great partner. I feel like that has to be there. If you're just a shitty person, then I'd be much less inclined to say that you're going to find someone. What?
No, that was perfect.
And
If you were a shitty person.
well, yeah, if you were, I would be like, "Oh yeah, good luck." No, I'm just kidding. But I'm kidding. There are shitty people that
No,
want to
I
be
know
with
there
other
are.
shitty
I
people.
just it's shitty people
The but
deserve each other.
so that needs to be there. You're a good human. And
Check.
yeah, check. And you need to be like putting yourself out there, not like every single moment and not in the most intense way all the time, but like have a general posture of like openness. And I feel like you have that. Like you're not
Yeah.
super closed off, you're not saying no to opportunities that come your way. And then I feel like that you are obviously interested in, of course, say no if you're not interested, but
Well, yeah, and I have no
and
problem
then
saying no.
yeah, that's so good. I do feel like the other factor, and this is why I'm not like it'll definitely happen, is like there's a weird bit of like luck or
Oh, it's totally
chance
luck. Like, I
involved.
mean, and chance, because you never know where you're gonna run into somebody. Like, I
Yeah.
used to go to places like and I'm doing this less, right? Like I used to go to places with the intent of trying to meet people. And now it's just like, if it happens, great. If not, I'm going to read my book and like just chill. I don't know. I think you're right. Like you have to be open to it. Like I used to think putting myself out there meant like walking up to people awkwardly and like
Mm,
introducing myself. And I refuse to do that anymore. Like
that's fair.
that's just not something I'm willing to do because like so much of my professional life is people just like drop in and are like, "Hey, you did this thing. Tell me more." Like, I want to hire you, right? So like I
Mm,
think there's a certain amount of like maybe I'll be waiting forever, right? Like, but there's a certain level of openness to like wanting to find a wife and wanting to find a partner and just like I kind of know where I'm wounded and I like just kind of try to stay where I'm comfortable, but also put myself in situations where meeting people is inevitably part of it, right? Like
yeah.
going rock climbing or like not even going rock climbing, but like I did a lead climbing class and I met some people and I didn't want to date any of them, but like some of them, it was weird because I knew someone that knew two of my friends. It's like
Oh,
really weird. But like things like that happen, right? Like so
yeah.
it's bound to happen. Like there's this big thing at my church, like a sexual assault scandal kind of thing, where there's multiple allegations against one of the pastors for
Oof.
sexual predation. And one of the people he preyed upon would be someone we would consider a vulnerable population. So now I have to leave that church. And right, like I'm leaving with relationships intact. Like I'm being very intentional about keeping some of those friends, but I'm also going to join a new church where I'll have to meet new people. Maybe I'll meet somebody there. I don't know.
Yeah.
Who
Yeah.
cares? It could happen.
It could happen. I'm with you, and you're doing a great job for what it's worth. Not that you need me to
I
validate your life
appreciate it. I
choices,
don't know that
but
I'm doing a great job, but I'm trying to
yeah,
do something
I
right.
mean that's all we can do, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Anyway, this has been a great time.
Been fantastic.
Before I let you go, what are you working on right now? How can people find you and support you and your work?
What am I working on right now? So right now I'm working on my first book. That's probably
Amazing.
the big thing. And a Mayo grant, right? So I'm working on this book for Norton that is due in September. So it'll probably come out around Christmas, is my
Cool.
hunch. So you can be looking in Barnes and Noble and Amazon and Target, right, for my book because it'll be
Yes.
printed. Like they're gonna print copies. They have a whole like I know I got a good deal on my advance. Like it's not like amazing quit your job money, but like I got a good advance. So like I know they're banking on it doing well. And so there's a certain level of like be looking for that book to
Definitely.
come out in either at the end of the year or next year in 2024. So either
Cool.
end of 2023, beginning of 2024, maybe spring 2024. There's that, and then I'm working on this Mayo grant to train pediatricians and social workers and nurses and physicians assistants in rural Mayo clinics to work with people with autism,
Nice.
particularly kids, because if we want to increase confidence to increase access to pediatric care for kids
Hmm.
suspected of having autism. And so you can be looking for a publication on that towards the end of the year. Like I think we'll probably start writing the manuscript over the summer. So like I would love to say there are like things people can get involved with, but like really like you're just gonna have to wait because I want to put out some really solid things and like by putting out some really solid things, I think that should open some really cool doors. So if you have like if you know somebody with autism and trauma, please reach out to me on my website, inderbitzen.com. I run a study on clinicians doing sensory motor psychotherapy on kids with autism and trauma. And so I'd be foolish not to use this opportunity to say if you have a kid who's been abused and has autism, right? Like might be a great fit for our study if they're between the ages of 8 and 17. And so reach out. There are clinicians I work with across Canada and the US who are willing to take people. I don't actually take patients from outside Wisconsin. Sometimes people come to me saying, I found you on a podcast. And it's like, that's great.
Mm.
But like, I don't live in California or Vermont or wherever the hell they are.
Yeah.
So, but I do have a study that I'm running where people could actually become a part of that. And so that would be one way to get involved with me, is to get involved in this sensory motor psychotherapy study, because we need five patients, and in order to get the data we want. So that would be
Nice.
super helpful. So
Awesome.
feel
I hope my listeners are.
familiar with child abuse victims?
No, I guess actually, yeah, that sounds terrible. But
That does sound terrible.
you know what I mean, though. Like,
I know
I
what you
hope
mean.
that I don't know, this brings some connections that are helpful,
I'm sure it
um,
will.
for multiple people. But thank you so much for coming on. This was
No
so much
problem.
fun. Very fun, winding road. Appreciate you coming on a second time. I don't even know if I mentioned this to anyone listening.
This
This is
is
our
our
second
second
time
time.
trying to record. Had some audio issues the first time, but yeah, so appreciate your time. I know you're a busy person. All right. Thank you so much for listening to Who Are You and What Are You Doing Here? I hope you enjoyed this episode. I always say this, but let me know what you think. Definitely a bit of an experiment to just let the conversation flow wherever it wanted to flow. And I hope you enjoyed it. Please reach out to Sean if any of the work that he does sounds interesting to you. So if you have autism or know somebody who does, who might be a good fit for the study that he's participating in, I'll also link his website, which I'm sure will have his book listed once it's available, which should be end of 2023, early 2024. I honestly think that will be a really good resource for all of us, like just in terms of understanding people and folks with autism, and trauma. So keep your eye out for that. And I think that's it. Thank you for listening. Thoughts, reviews, likes, subscribes, follows are all welcome. And I'm going to stop talking now. Have a great rest of your day and see you in the next one.